Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be doing a quick review outside of our normal reviews of the Scalextric motorcycle and sidecar. If you've not seen one of my reviews before, there are three parts. First of all, we look at the one-to-one vehicle itself. Then we look at the actual Scalextric model, both from a detail of the body and the decals, and then we'll take the body off and we'll look at the mechanics underneath to see if there's anything unique. And then finally what we'll do is we take it for a test round our track here to see how well it performs with regard to drivability and the lap times that it will produce. With regard to this car today, we're going to compare this to our 1980s cars. We reviewed 6 cars during the 1980s, and we'll compare this motorcycle with those lap times to see how well this particular vehicle performs. So rather than look into the history of motorcycles and sidecars, the one-to-one vehicles, because unlike, say, the Escort that we have here, this particular vehicle, this particular motorcycle sidecar isn't based on any one motorcycle, rather it's just based on the idea of motorcycles and sidecars, and they're not as popular as the cars were. Indeed, even today when we go to motorcycle racing, you will see motorcycles and sidecars, but it's very difficult to sort of put a name to them unless you're particularly into that part of motorsport. So from a Scalextric perspective, we are reviewing the catalogue. So we are looking at this from a perspective of a small child, a young child, looking at those catalogues just before their birthday or Christmas and looking through and thinking, oh, I want to buy one of those cars, and then seeing how well they actually perform in today's world. And you can buy these on eBay, of course. The catalogues that we've been looking at started in the 1960s. So from 1960 all the way through to present day, each year Scalextric would publish one of these catalogues. Motorcycles and sidecars first appeared in 1962. So just 2 years in to Scalextric publishing catalogues, we see our first motorcycle sidecar. It was released as part of a set. It was the MC1 set, so the motorcycle 1 set, and it contained a pair of Typhoon motorcycles. In 1963, Scalextric then released the Hurricane motorcycle as well. So we had 2 types of bike out, the Typhoon and the Hurricane. Both of these were belt driven. They had a motor that was side mounted. So we're going to have a look at this one in a minute and we'll see that this was longitudinally mounted, but this was side mounted with a pinion here, or at least the drive pulley here, and connected to that would be a belt that would then connect to the drive wheels. We first saw this motorcycle in 1980, part of the 500 TT race set. And one of the things that they said within the catalogue itself, and I'll try and read it out for you verbatim, is it says, the fast action of motorcycle racing is now at your fingertips. With different handling features, new styles of driving are required and extra skill is needed. Now that's important because from 2 perspectives. Number one, up until about the year 2000, so even in the 1990s, Scalextric were keen to paint a picture for us as purchasers of the vehicles that we were buying and the sets that we were buying as to what they were about. So, you know, the description of the TT race, or the description of a Formula 1 race, or the description of a saloon car race, or a rally car race, or a touring car race. And they would try and give you a picture in your mind of what it was that you were buying so you could get excited by it. Now, that's no different for these cars here. As we say, we see the skill and the attention required. But also, what they did with this particular vehicle was they said that this does need a different driving style. This does need more skill. So they were very open with us as purchasers of this vehicle that this was something a little bit different. So we'll see how that transpires when we take it to the track. And of course, in the 60s and indeed in the 80s, we didn't have any magna traction. So these bikes are magless bikes. There's nothing to hold them to the track other than the design of the vehicle itself. As we go through the 1990s, we get more versions of this particular car, and we have more reference to the skills that are required. as we head into 1991, so we had the decade of the 60s, we had motorcycles. We didn't have anything in the 70s, then we had them in the 80s, we had the motorcycles, and again in the 90s we had the Isle of Man 500 race, I think it was. And we had the yellow and the red sidecars that were released then. Of course, we now have magna traction. We're into the 90s. Then later on in 1993, they released two other versions of these sidecars, again with magna traction. That was the white Texaco and the yellow shell version of this particular bike. We then had to wait till 1995 until the Power Rangers came out, and then Scalextric again released four more of these, all coinciding with the Power Rangers characters, and there were four names within those, which I won't repeat to you here. But it was interesting really because all of these bikes shared the same look. There wasn't anything different about them, and I'll flash up a picture about a sidecar that I've seen maybe in the last 5 years or so, racing at either Coombe Castle or Thruxton or Brands Hatch, I can't remember which it is, but yeah, I mean they're very, very different look to this short, stubby, rounded feel. So last time we see reference to motorcycles, and of course they do class these as motorcycles, even though we call them motorcycles and sidecars or sidecars. It's 2005 when we see the release of the British Superbikes, and these are the proper two-wheel motorcycles with the particular special guide that keeps them upright. But that was the last time we've seen any motorcycles from Scalextric. So we saw them in the 60s, nothing in the 70s, we see them in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s, and then they dropped from the 2010 decade onwards. I've not seen anything since then. So anyway, that's a bit of a background of the motorcycle sidecars of Scalextric. So let's bring the camera over and have a more detailed look at this body shell and the vehicle's components beneath. Okay, see you in a minute. Okay, so welcome back. Here is the car that we're looking at, the motorcycle sidecar we're looking at. We've got our Escort as well. I'll come back to that in a sec. So from a design perspective, we have the two riders. They're nicely done. You can see the feet of the driver here, the person that's in control of the sidecar itself, and then you've got the driver figure. You've got some nice detail with the back. They've got the crimping of the clothing that they're wearing around the arms, around the back, around the legs. So again, nice bit of detail there. From a decals perspective, I mean, the chassis itself is all black, and then they've just put the green and the white flashing on here and there. So nothing specifically called out to say that this is a particular type of motorcycle. Just some very, very generic branding. The wheels are nice. These are the chrome wheels, so they've put those in, and you can see those on both sides. And then we do have another wheel which we'll look at in more detail in a second when we take the top off. So that's pretty much it. Nice colouring, nothing special in my mind, and a reasonable reproduction of a sidecar. But the chrome wheels are a nice touch. With regard to the screws, we've got two screws. Here, one is raised, so this one here we can easily see, and we can pop that out. And then the second one is sunk right deep inside, so we'll pop that out as well. Okay. Ooh. I think I've got a bit of blue tack in here, so we're maybe getting a bit of blue tack stick. There we go. So underneath, there's nothing going on in here, just the usual sort of connections that you may have seen, whereby you're kind of holding the axles down, holding various parts of the body down, etc., etc. So nothing special about underneath there. But this is quite unique. The motor that's used here is tiny, so it's not the usual Mabuchi that we've been looking at. If we bring this one back in, again we've got a massive motor in here. So again, it's not the old 70s motors. It's a very unique motor, so it would have been an expensive build cost, I would have thought, for Scalextric to do, and that may well be why they did so many releases of this particular model, with all those Power Ranger releases, just to try and use up the parts, take advantage of a popular TV series, a popular film series, see if they couldn't shift all of these components that they had. Inside, it's very tight. So we've got our sort of usual guide that we've seen many times before, same guide as you've got on the Escort here. So that's just attached to the chassis itself, but the wires are all very nicely tied up and kept in place. The usual axle, rear axle, but again, if we look at this in comparison to the Escort, really narrow. I mean, really narrow, barely enough room to get the bearings, the main gear and the wheels on within that body shell. So extremely narrow set of wheels. Same size tyres and wheels as you got on the Escort, by the way. So the we can swap these wheels around, and I'm using the same tyres indeed on here that I use on here. I do have the original rubber tyres. They do work. It's just that I prefer the extra grip that I get from these silicons. While we're looking at that, look at the size difference between these two as well. I mean, in terms of wheelbase, if we look at the rear wheels, we've got our guide is here, and this is the important distance. We've talked about the front wheels and the wheelbase, but it's the guide to the rear axle that's important. So you can see how short that is. I mean, it's almost half the size or half the length, I should say, of that Escort. You'll notice that I've got blue tack in here. I needed the blue tack in order to increase the handling capabilities of this car. I could remove it. I could use lead as well. That would probably make it slightly better. But I just had blue tack down here by the track, and I whacked it in, and it seems to have done the trick. Now the front wheel, it doesn't do anything. So you can see here it's on a pivot. It's made of hard plastic as well, so it's not, there's no rubber on there or anything like that. There's no grip that's provided to that, and there's no support that's provided by that either. So that just simply flops up and down and doesn't really do anything at all. Worth noting though, the body is longer on the driver's side than it is on the passenger side, and that I think has an effect on the weight distribution as you're going around different corners. So cornering one way, you've got a lot more weight down on it versus cornering the other way, where you may find that the vehicle behaves slightly differently. And I've seen mention of that. I'm not sure if I see it on my track or not. I think I do. Maybe that's because I've just sort of read about it and I'm thinking, well, that's what's happening at that particular point. Maybe it's just the way I'm driving. I'll make a final note on this. I don't know how clearly you can see that, but if I turn these wheels, what I look at when I'm turning these wheels, if I get that in the camera view for you, is I look at whether or not the wheel itself is true to the flat part of the chassis here, or whether it's wobbling, wobbling backwards and forwards, wobbling side to side. Anyway, when I did that on these two, I found that they were a bit wobbly to start with. So I reset them, put them off, put some glue on, put them back on again, twist them until I see them as flat as they possibly can be against that part of the chassis. So I did that to it. The other thing I had was that the motor was overheating, and I had excessive brakes as well. And as it turned out, there's a bushing. Now, if you push the motor, you can see that there's an amount of movement that motor has, right? It can go in and out, that pinion, you can just about see that clicking in and out. That movement is stopped by a washer that's inside the motor between this part of the armature here and this part of the case. And my washer was hard up against the case, so hard in fact that it was slowing the speed of the motor down. So I actually had to, for the first time ever, I had to pull the motor out, pull the end bell off, and then using my pinion tool, push that washer in so that it wasn't so hard up against the case. And that really helped the overheating issues, and also it made it run more smoothly. So not saying that you're going to have to do all of that work, but just in case you've got issues with your particular sidecars, it is something that you can do if you want to. You can just pull all of that black end bell off. You have to take the pinion off. You have to have a pinion puller tool, you have to have a pinion reset tool, and then you can use that pinion reset tool to move that washer in a bit. Okay, so that's enough chat about the vehicle itself. Let's see how it performs on the track. Hello, welcome back to the track. For those who've not seen these before, we're going to do 5 laps, and the aim is to not come off with those 5 laps, which means that I'll be driving slightly slower than I would with hot laps. Down the bottom here we have our list of 1980s cars and how well they performed. So we did reviews on each of these cars, fastest being the Ferrari at 6.6 and then the Mini Clubman there with 9.6. Given how Scalextric have said this car is difficult to drive, I'm expecting this to be off that scale. However, let's see where we end up. So let's press start and we begin our outlap. So this isn't a time lap, this is just simply an outlap. Alrighty, I mean that is a tricky car to drive, don't get me wrong, that really is. So we did an 8.88, which puts us above our 8.88, yeah, puts us above our Triumph TR7 at 8.98. So that puts us slap bang in the middle of the Triumph and the Escort. Which is a surprise. Now, yeah, I don't know what more to say. It is really, really tricky to drive, but it is drivable, and there is definitely a different way of driving. I mean, you certainly can't really accelerate through any tight corners. So as I come down the end of this straight, I have to really be slow here. Now I can increase the acceleration around that corner, but then I'm off the power for this one and just try and keep it smooth. Then this is all really tight here, and again drift around that corner, down here, and then on the brakes again. So it's quite an interesting drive, but yeah, pretty quick. Now, I love jumps, so here we have a jump. Now, this is sort of me thinking that cresting the hill, as you see in the Isle of Man TT and flying over it. So let's see how she gets on, shall we? There we go. So I'm going to need a bit of speed to get over that jump. Hey! And she does it. So we've got the Isle of Man TT all in full action around the track. And here we go again. Whoa! This time we're off. But we can do the jumps if we wish to do the jumps. Even more skill and thought is required. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to see more of this sort of stuff, please do subscribe. I publish stuff about once a week, and we're just at the end of a review of 1990s Scalextric catalogue cars. So we've got one more to go, and that'll be done next week at some point. So if you're interested in seeing that, catch up on all the videos that are on the YouTube channel, and I will see you back here next week. All right, take care.